The moment my mom said it, my coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Your sister never asks anyone for anything. She's always been the strong one, the independent one, unlike some people at this table. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. There were 6 of us at that Sunday dinner. Me, my mom, my stepdad, my sister's boyfriend, and the elephant in the room that had been sitting at our family table for the past 3 years. The elephant had a price tag. Exactly $2,800 a month, transferred quietly, every single month, without fail, without complaint, without anyone at that table knowing except me and my sister. My sister, who was currently nodding along to my mom's little speech like she was hearing it for the first time. I set my coffee cup down, slowly, carefully. The way you set something down when your hands are shaking and you don't want anyone to notice. I need to back up because none of this makes sense without the part that came before it. My sister is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was everything I wasn't: confident, social, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately owned it. My mom adored her. Not in the obvious, embarrassing way some parents show favoritism, but in the quieter, more lasting kind. The kind where every report card comparison stung just a little. The kind where, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" wasn't said out loud but was somehow communicated in the thousand smaller ways. I'm not saying I had a terrible childhood. I'm saying I grew up understanding that my sister and I occupied different places in our family story, and I had mostly made peace with that by the time I hit my mid-20s. What I had not made peace with, what I never saw coming, was the phone call I got 3 years ago, on a Tuesday night in February, when my sister called me crying so hard I almost couldn't understand what she was saying. It took me 20 minutes to piece it together. She had been let go from her job, not laid off in the polite corporate sense, actually fired, for reasons she was vague about and I didn't push. Her lease was up in 6 weeks. She had about $400 in savings, and she was 3 months behind on her car payment. I'm not proud of how fast I said yes. I didn't think it through. I didn't ask the right questions. I heard my sister crying and I said, "Okay, tell me what you need," and that was that. We agreed on $2,800 a month, enough to cover her rent in her new place, her car payment, her utilities and groceries, with a little left over. It was supposed to be temporary. 3 months? Maybe 4? Just until she got back on her feet. We also agreed, and I want to be very clear that this was her request, not mine, that we would not tell our mom and stepdad. She said she didn't want them to worry. She said she was already embarrassed enough. She said she just needed a little time to get stable and then she'd tell them everything herself. I believed her, so I kept the secret. 3 months became 6. 6 became 12. 12 became 24. 2 years in, my sister had a new job. She talked about it in group text like it was going really well. She posted pictures from a weekend trip to Nashville. She bought a new couch. She started talking about eventually saving up for a condo. Meanwhile, I was quietly draining my own savings account month after month, because $2,800 doesn't just appear out of nowhere when you're a 29-year-old making a decent but not extraordinary salary. I had paused my Roth IRA contributions. I had told myself I'd deal with my student loans next year for 2 years running. I had quietly stopped meeting friends for dinners out because I was always watching my own numbers. And here's the thing I kept coming back to. The thing that sat in the back of my mind even when I didn't want to look at it directly. She never once brought up stopping. Not a single conversation that started with, "Hey, I'm doing a lot better now. I think I can handle things on my own." Not a single text saying, "I'm going to start weaning off this, here's my plan." Nothing. Every month, like clockwork, she would send me a short message. Sometimes just, "Thank you. Heimed." Sometimes nothing at all. And the transfer would go through and that was it. I started asking questions, gently, over a year into it. "How's the new job going? Is the salary enough to start covering some of your expenses?" "Oh, it's going well. Still getting settled though, you know how it is." "Are you feeling more stable financially?" "I've been thinking about maybe adjusting things. I mean, it's still pretty tight." "Things are expensive." I'll let you know when I'm in a better place. I didn't push. I don't know why I didn't push. Maybe because pushing felt like punishing someone who was already struggling. Maybe because I had been trained, my whole life, to be the one who didn't make waves at family gatherings, who didn't cause problems, who handled things quietly while my sister got the spotlight. But I was starting to feel something building in me that I didn't have a clean word for. Not quite resentment, not quite anger, something more like clarity. Like I was slowly seeing the shape of something I hadn't wanted to look at. The dinner was in April. My stepdad had made his famous pot roast, the one he breaks out for birthdays and Easter, and apparently also for Sunday nights when he just feels like it. My mom was in a good mood. My sister had brought her boyfriend, who I'd only met twice, and he seemed nice enough. It started the way most family dynamics disasters start, casually, with something that sounded like a compliment. My mom was talking about a coworker of hers whose adult son had moved back home because he couldn't afford his apartment. She shook her head, that particular slow head shake that meant she had thoughts. Some kids just can't figure it out, she said. They need to be propped up forever. My stepdad made a sound of agreement. Your sister has never been like that, my mom continued, looking at my sister with a warmth that I recognized from years of being on the other side of it. She's always handled her own business, never come to us with her hand out, never made us worry. She's just responsible, independent. My sister smiled, small and modest, like someone accepting a compliment they knew they deserved. Unlike some people at this table, my mom added, and this time she did glance at me, just briefly, with that particular look that said she was referencing something specific, something she had not forgotten. The something specific was a $1,200 loan I had asked my parents for when I was 23, freshly out of college, when my car broke down and I didn't have the money to fix it and I needed the car for work. I had paid it back within 4 months. I had literally never asked them for anything before or since, but it lived in my mother's mental ledger, apparently permanently, as evidence of my fundamental inability to handle my own affairs. I thought about the $67,200 I had transferred to my sister's account over the past 2 years and 4 months. I thought about my Roth IRA sitting untouched. I thought about the couch in my sister's apartment, which I had technically paid for. And something in me just went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means you're letting it go. The other kind. I didn't say anything at dinner. I smiled and changed the subject and helped clear the dishes and said goodbye to everyone with normal hugs. My sister texted me on the drive home. A little, low sorry about mom. ZGA. Like we were in on some shared joke together. I didn't respond that night. I sat in my apartment and pulled up my bank statements and I did something I had been avoiding doing for 2 years. I added it all up. Every single transfer. Every month. All of it. $67,200. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I thought about my sister's Nashville trip, her new couch, her Instagram post from 3 weeks ago at what looked like a very nice rooftop bar, her comment in the family group chat about finally feeling like herself again. I thought about the fact that she had a steady job, that she had been employed for over a year, that she had never once, not once, come to me with a plan to transition off the support she was still taking every month. I thought about my mom's face when she said, "Unlike some people at this table." I opened a new note on my phone. I wrote 3 words at the top. What am I doing? And I sat with that question until almost midnight. I didn't call my sister the next day or the day after. I needed to think clearly, and I knew that if I called her, she would cry, and when she cried, I had a long history of abandoning whatever position I had held going into the conversation. Instead, I talked to my best friend who had known about the arrangement from the beginning. She had never been subtle about her feelings. I've been waiting 2 years for you to have this conversation with yourself, she said. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop, I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud, and it felt strange in my mouth. Real. Good. How? I'm going to give her 1 month's notice. I'll tell her the May transfer is the last one. My friend was quiet for a second. Are you going to tell your mom? I hadn't decided that yet. Part of me wanted to. A bigger part of me knew that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to blow anything up. The point was to stop quietly hollowing out my own financial future for someone who had stopped being in crisis at least 12 months ago. I don't know, I said. I'm going to talk to my sister first. I called my sister on a Thursday evening. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, which meant that when she picked up sounding relaxed and cheerful, I almost lost my nerve immediately. But I didn't. I've been thinking a lot about our arrangement, I said. I want to talk to you about winding it down. The cheerful tone evaporated. What do you mean winding it down? I mean stopping. I'm going to send the maid transfer, and then I think we need to wrap this up. Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. I don't understand, she finally said. Things are still really tight for me, and I don't know what happened in that moment. Maybe it was hearing those exact words again, the same words she had given me every time I tried to open this conversation for the past year. But something in me stopped performing the part I had always played. You have a job, I said. You've had a job for over a year. You make a salary. You went to Nashville 2 months ago. You bought new furniture. And you're still taking $2,800 from me every month without any indication that you ever plan to stop. So I need you to help me understand what really tight means, because from where I'm standing, I don't see it. Another long silence. That's not fair, she said. You don't know what my expenses are like. You're right, I don't. Because you've never actually shown me. You've never said, here's what I make, here's what I owe, here's where I'm short, here's my timeline to fix it. Every time I've asked, I've gotten, it's still really tight, I'll let you know. That's not a plan, that's just indefinite. I could hear her breathing. I've been helping you for almost 2.5 years, I continued. I've transferred over $67,000 to your account. I've paused my own retirement contributions. I've run my savings down. And 3 days ago I sat at Mom's table and listened to her tell me I'm the irresponsible one in this family, while you nodded along. I paused, and I'm starting to think that the arrangement we have is actually part of what's making that possible. You're not being fair, she said again. But her voice had changed. Something underneath it now. Something I couldn't quite name. I'm being honest, I said. There's a difference. May is the last transfer. I really hope that gives you enough runway to get things sorted out. She hung up before I finished the sentence. The next 2 weeks were mostly silence. My sister didn't text me. I got a slightly pointed message from my mom asking if everything was okay between you two. But I kept it vague and said we were just both busy. Then, on a Saturday morning, my mom called. She had talked to my sister. I don't know all of what my sister told her, but enough had come out. The transfers, the amounts, the timeline, that my mom was no longer asking if everything was okay. Is this true? She asked. Her voice was strange, flat in a way I hadn't heard before. Yes, I said. For 2.5 years? Yes. She was quiet for a long time. Why didn't you tell us? Because your daughter asked me not to. She said she was embarrassed and she didn't want you to worry. She told me. My mom stopped. She told me she'd been handling everything on her own. I know, I said. I know what she told you. The silence that followed was the kind that changes things. I could almost hear my mom recalibrating, going back through things, rearranging the story she had built in her head about who her daughters were, about who needed protecting and who didn't, about who had been handling things quietly this whole time without any acknowledgement or credit. I owe you an apology, my mom said finally. What I said at dinner. It's okay, I said. Not because it was entirely okay, but because I didn't want to have that conversation standing in my kitchen on a Saturday morning. Some things need more room than that. It's not okay, she said. It wasn't okay. My sister and I have had one real conversation since then. It was uncomfortable and necessary and didn't resolve everything, but it moved some things. She said she hadn't intended for it to go on as long as it did. I said I believed her, mostly. I said I should have set clearer boundaries earlier, and I meant that too. We're not in the same place we were. Something shifted. But we're talking. The thing I keep thinking about, the thing I haven't entirely worked out, is this. I don't regret helping her. I really don't. When she called me that February night 3 years ago, she was genuinely in crisis, and helping her was the right thing to do. I would do that part again. What I regret is losing myself somewhere in the middle of it, letting months and then years go by without asking the hard questions because I was afraid of the discomfort that would follow. Accepting silence as an answer, performing the role of the one who just quietly handles things, which, I've come to understand, is its own kind of trap. My mom called me last week to tell me about something completely unrelated, some neighborhood drama involving her book club. Halfway through, she stopped and said, "You know, I don't think I've ever actually thanked you for being the person you are. I should do that more." It wasn't a grand gesture. She didn't cry, it wasn't a movie moment, but I stood in my kitchen and let it land, and I thought, sometimes the acknowledgement arrives late and quiet and in the middle of a story about someone else's argument over a book you haven't read. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you take the late arrival and you decide it counts. I canceled the May transfer. That part felt clean and clear and completely right. And then I reopened my retirement account, logged in for the first time in over 2 years, and I set up the automatic contribution again, the amount I should have been putting in this whole time. It wasn't a dramatic moment. Nobody saw it. There was no reaction shot, no one watching my face. I just pressed confirm, closed the laptop, and made myself a cup of coffee. And for the first time in a long time, I sat with it quietly and didn't feel the need to apologize to anyone. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in this story, not just the surface of it, the money, the dinner, the phone call, but the deeper mechanics. How did I end up in that position in the first place? And why did it take so long to get out of it? Here's what I've landed on. I didn't end up sending $67,200 to my sister because I was naive. I did it because I had spent my whole life practicing a very specific skill. The skill of not making things harder for other people. Of absorbing discomfort quietly. Of being the one who handles things without asking for recognition. In some situations, that's a genuine strength. In this one, it became a way of opting out of my own life. And my sister, I don't think she's a villain. I really don't. I think she found herself in a crisis, accepted help, and then never built the habit of questioning whether she still needed it. That's a human thing. We adapt to our circumstances, and sometimes the circumstances we adapt to aren't good for us. Being supported indefinitely wasn't good for her, even if she couldn't see it from inside it. It kept her from having to fully stand up. It kept her from knowing what she was actually capable of. The part that stayed with me longest was my mom's face, or rather, what I imagined her face doing when my sister finally had to tell her the truth. My mom had built a story about who her daughters were, a story where my sister was the self-sufficient one, the strong one, the one you didn't have to worry about. That story wasn't just wrong, it had been actively maintained. And I had been one of the people maintaining it, quietly, month after month, because I thought I was protecting everyone. What I was actually doing was protecting the story. And stories, when they're built on something that isn't true, eventually cost somebody something real. That's the thing about cause and effect that nobody puts on a motivational poster. It's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a sound effect. It just accumulates slowly in the background until the weight of it becomes impossible to ignore. I ignored it for 2.5 years. The bill came due anyway. I don't think I'll make that mistake again. Not because I learned some lesson about being less generous, but because I learned something about what generosity actually requires. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to have the uncomfortable conversation instead of just transferring money and hoping the problem eventually resolves itself. Real help has a shape to it, a beginning and an end, a plan. What I was doing didn't have any of those things, it was just ongoing, indefinite. And indefinite help, I've come to understand, isn't really help at all. It's avoidance wearing a generous face. I reopened my retirement account the same week I canceled the last transfer. That felt important, not as a gesture, but as a decision. A decision that I was going to start showing up for my own life the way I had spent years showing up for everyone else's. That's not a small shift. For some of us, it's the hardest one.